Hey, it's Yay for Yarn, and today I'm going to show you how to make a flat half circle on your Addi knitting machine. So let's get started. So here is a flat half circle. These are very quick and easy to make and can be used for a lot of different projects. And this is basically half of a regular flat circle, but we have to go about making it in a little bit of a different manner than a regular flat circle. Now, a regular flat circle is knit from a tube. We're knitting this from a flat panel. And so I'm going to show you how to do this on the Addi Pro. You can also do it on the Addi King. What I have here is I'm in plain knitting mode, which is the flat panel mode. I've got my first white needle ready to go. I've got some scissors and a yarn needle as always. And I've got some worsted weight yarn. So I'm going to start by casting on for a flat panel. Now, one interesting thing about making a flat half circle is that normally when we make a flat circle, we do a tube. And the small Addi has 22 needles on it. So you would think, in theory, that to make a half circle you would use 11 needles, but that actually doesn't work. You end up with more of a it's less than half a circle, but it's kind of in between a third and a half. So that's not what we're going for. We want half of a flat circle. So in order to make half of a flat circle, we have to cast on more than half of the stitches. So for a flat half circle, instead of 11 needles, we're going to be casting on with 15. Now, if you're doing this on the Addi King, then you're going to be following the same method that we're using for the Addi Pro. And as I just mentioned, you're going to need to cast on more than half of the needles. The Addi King has 46 needles, so half of that would be 23. So to get a flat half circle, you would need to cast on about 30 needles because you need to have more than half of your needles. Not 3/4, but a little bit more than half. So here's my yarn. I'm going to start by hooking it into the first white needle and casting on as usual for a flat panel. So I've got my yarn hooked in the first white needle. I'm going to go behind the second one, in front of the third, behind the fourth, in front of the fifth, behind the sixth, and keep going until I have 15. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and it hooks in that 15th needle. I'm going to sink the 15th needle. You can use the stoppers that come with the machine for this, but I kind of prefer not to use those. And now we're going to go back and knit a flat panel. So we're going to knit back and forth across these 15 needles for 17 to 18 rows, your choice. Usually for a flat circle we do 17, but 18 will work too. On my other one I did 18, so I'm going to do 18 for this one. And we're just going to be knitting back and forth for a total of 18 rows. And don't listen to your row counter for this, because when you come back across to the other end, right here, when you sink that last white needle and let the needle next to it pull the yarn below this red tab, you're not going to go far enough to hit the black needle that clicks the row counter up another row. So you're going to count, count in your head. That was 2. So I'm going to keep going until I have 18 rows, and then I'll show you what to do next. Alright, there's my 18th row. So I'm going to take the yarn out of the yarn guide and out of the last 2 needles that it was hooked in. The last needle that it should be coming out of is the one that has the end of the knitting on it. So generally when you use these flat circles, you're going to be sewing them to something else. So you want to make sure you leave a long enough tail with which to do that. You don't need a whole lot of yarn for finishing it up, just a few inches. So just make sure you have enough yarn to attach it to whatever you're going to attach it to before you cut. So here's my length of yarn. I'm going to put this onto my yarn needle. And I like to rotate the machine to do this part. You're going to just pick up all of the stitches off the needles as you go back the other way and let the needles drop out of their stitches. So I'm just going to pull that through my stitches like so. We have a little rectangular flat panel here, and now I'm going to show you how to make it into a flat half circle. So the first thing that we're going to do is cinch these ends. Now normally when you do a flat circle, imagine this was a whole circle right here. You take the tube and you cinch the end shut on this side and cinch the ends shut on that side. But because we're not doing a tube, we're cinching the ends of the flat panel. So I'm going to pull on the yarn that's attached to my needle and cinch it closed as tight as it'll go. And I'm going to find the very edge right here of the panel before it turns to go along this edge right here. So here's the very top of the side edge. I'm going to cinch my hole closed, pull my needle through there, tighten it as much as you can to make the hole disappear. Now we're going to turn it over, pick up a strand of yarn, and tie a tight little knot to secure the cinched part. So now what we're going to do is take the yarn out of the yarn needle, save that for later. We're going to give the panel a little stretch and find the cast on tail. Now we're going to pull on the cast on tail to do the same thing on this end. We're going to thread it into the yarn needle, find the corner here, and so here you see this was the one corner of the flat panel. This is the same, the same edge, but the other corner on the other side. We're going to tighten it, close up the hole, turn it over and pick up a little strand of yarn right there and tie a little knot. So now if you take the two ends that you've cinched shut and meet them together like so, you can see we have the beginnings of a flat half circle. It doesn't look very straight along this edge yet, but we'll fix that in just a second. So you're going to take the yarn that's attached to your yarn needle, and it doesn't matter which direction you go, but you're going to sew up. We have a gap here, as you can see. You're going to sew the front edge to the back edge from the center to this outside corner on, with each tail. So I'm going to take one tail, sew from the center to the one side, take the other tail, sew from the center to the other side. So first what I'm going to do is take a stitch right through the center to make sure the holes are lined up, like so. And then I'm basically just going to whip stitch. It doesn't have to be a close whip stitch where all the stitches are close together, just a regular whip stitch. And I'm going to go through both edges of that flat circle, preferably taking your stitches in a stronger portion of the fabric. You don't just want to pick up one strand of yarn like that, because then that's just going to stretch a big hole in it. So you want to take a stronger stitch. If you can see along the edge of your flat panel, it looks like every other row there's like a knot. It's not really a knot, but that's what you want to go through, because that is more stable and that is a better place to insert your needle when you're seaming. So I made it to the corner here. I'm going to give it a little tug, make sure there's not too much extra slack in my seam, but I also don't want to gather it up like that. So you want to make sure it lays flat. And then at my corner, I'm going to pick up another strand of yarn, tie a small knot, like so. Take the yarn out of the needle, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side with my other tail. And I'm going to whip stitch those two edges together, going through the what looks like the knots along the edge of the fabric. And as you can see, as we do this, sewing the edges together, it kind of decreases this little indented part here where it seems to go in the center, and it makes it lay much more straight. So there's my last stitch on that side. Adjust it, to my liking, and then I'm going to take a knot up here, tighten it like so, and just sewing those two edges together makes a big difference in how this edge looks. It makes it look much closer to being straight. It's not perfectly straight because there is a slight indentation here, but it's as close to being straight as it's going to get. So that is a flat half circle. Now, usually you're going to be sewing this onto something. So you're going to, leave whichever tail or both, if you want to use both tails to sew it onto whatever, then you can leave both tails, or if you want to weave one of them in, go ahead and do that by inserting your needle in between the layers and sliding the tail through. So I'm going to weave in my shorter tail. So I'm going to just insert it in between the two layers of fabric, wiggle the needle around, make sure that I'm not catching the back side of either side of the fabric, poke it out over here somewhere, and that is woven in. It's slipped in between the two layers of the fabric. Now I'm going to do the same thing to this one as well, but I just want to show you here, when you go to sew this onto something, you can, if you want to, you can correct this little indentation here just by how you sew it on to your project, just by making sure you're not pulling either side of that little indent more than the indent itself. So if you just sew it on straight, then that little indentation right there will disappear, especially if you're sewing this onto something else that's the same color, and you won't be able to see it at all. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you use this in a project, let me know how it turns out for you in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, making sure you click the little bell next to the subscribe button to be notified of new videos. Thanks for watching. Bye.